Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and tonight we're going to tell you how we felt about Nosferatu. A little late on this one, but finally we're here. Once again, I'm Captain Logan. Tonight I've got Connor Nielsen. I've got Robert Wild.
Hello.
And last but certainly least, Austin the Day Ghost.
Yo.
Thanks for joining me, guys. We've got a panel for this one. I know these guys are really excited to talk about this one. This is one of those movies that I probably wouldn't have done typically. I don't review a lot of horror movies, but I knew Austin really wanted to talk about it. And the timing was really interesting because Austin and I had a request this year. And Austin, I don't know if that was requested because of this or not, because it was so many months before that the initial request came in, but Austin and I actually reviewed the 70s remake earlier in the year, and so I was a little bit more prepared than I would have been otherwise, because I'd never seen the original, what is that, 1922, I think?
Yes.
And so I actually came into this knowing the basic outline of the plot, which it sticks to pretty well. And anyway, we'll talk about it. But like I said, the timing was really interesting. And then the next thing that we need to tackle on the request is another movie by this director. So like it's all coming together because we're doing a commentary on The Lighthouse this week.
Yeah, it's crazy. Lots of Eggers and Nosferatu.
Yeah, we've got Eggers symmetry or synergy happening right now. Anyway, Connor, I would love to hear you tackle the synopsis for this one.
All right, so Nosferatu follows the plot of Nosferatu, which is to say it is a pretty stringent retelling of Dracula. It's in case anyone doesn't know, the original Nosferatu is an unauthorized film adaptation of Dracula, where they just changed the names. It was a 1920s German film directed by F.W. Murnau. This is a North American retelling of that movie, directed by Robert Eggers, starring Nicholas Hoult and Lily Rose Depp. Bill Skarsgård is allegedly in this movie, but there's also Aaron Taylor Johnson, Ralph Ineson, and Emma Corrin. There's just a ton of people in this one. Oh, and of course, Willem Dafoe. So what we get is not well, his name's Hutter in this, right? Thomas Hutter, as opposed to Harker. But he is a real estate salesman. He has recently been married, and he gets tasked by he's German, right? This takes place in Germany, and he gets tasked to sell some real estate to a Transylvanian nobleman named Count Orlok. He goes there. There are the locals who are trying to get him out of there. He doesn't listen to the warnings, and then this count is a vampire, takes a liking to his wife, and then leaves him for dead in his castle as he travels back to Germany. And when he goes to Germany, he brings with him a plague, and the inner darkness of the characters comes out that they must confront. And there's a Van Helsing character, I think named Van Franz, played by Willem Dafoe. And he's like, we're dealing with a vampire, guys. We got to kill a vampire. It's all very traditional, and it's done in Robert Eggers' typical style, which is to sort of play with history and try to tell these stories that were in history, that are kind of more mythologized stories, but deal with them in a very historically accurate way. And so you get a lot of period accurate detail in the production and the dialect and stuff. And in the case of the Northman and this, it's very strange that it's in the English language to me, but I mean, if you got Universal money, there's no way in heck that you're going to be, doing this not in English. So anyways, that's Nosferatu.
Well, and if you did it in German, then none of these people could have British accents.
Yeah, it's true.
I'm not really sure what that was about. It's very accurate in every way but that.
That is true.
I mean, if they were all speaking German, it would be the same movie, but a lot angrier.
That's true, but there's a lot of anger in this movie. I think it would just serve the story. Like,
Oh, it would just be more.
Connor, I love Bill Skarsgård is allegedly in this movie. That's wonderful. Like, I'm looking at Orlok and I'm going like, I think I'm seeing a performance of an actual human being. Like, I'm not totally sure. Let's hear from Austin first with the sign flip and best thing, worst thing, basic feelings walking out of the theater. And Austin, I think you told me you've seen this twice.
I've seen it 3 times now.
Oh wow, jeez.
Yeah.
It has been out a while.
Yeah, exactly. So the first time I walked out and I said, I had a similar situation that I had with The Lighthouse where I saw that and I went, it's good, but I kind of expected it to be a little bit better. And on a second and third viewing, I was like, okay, no, this is just genuinely really good. I didn't really have as many holdups as I did on a first viewing. So definitely flipping green. As for best thing, worst thing, I'm gonna say my best thing is probably the cast. Specifically, I'm gonna say Willem Dafoe, because Willem Dafoe is an actor that I think we bring in a lot, and it's like, okay, be Willem Dafoe, like do your thing, and I think he's genuinely really good, and this is like one of his best performances in my opinion, and he's both cast against type and typecast in a similar way. Like, it's a weird line it rides, and I don't really know how it finds that pathway with it, but he's really great in this. Worst thing, so on a first viewing, I didn't really get Rose Depp's performance. A lot of people are really praising it, but I thought it was a little too over the top, and I like it more and more every time I see it. But there's still places where I feel like she's asked to do things that I don't think she can quite land. Specifically when she has to like scream and get like really big like that. But like I said, I like it more every time I see it. It's just some of that still doesn't really play for me super well. But yeah, overall, this is a really good movie, and it's the remake I wanted as opposed to the 70s one.
Yeah, kind of the antithesis to what Werner Herzog did in a lot of ways, Austin, because his movie is so much flatter looking, and there's not a lot of style, there's not a lot of panache, and it just kind of sits there. But like all the important beats are there, and there's some nice looking stuff that's being photographed. I just don't really care for how it's being photographed.
Yeah, well, and I also, like, on top of that, I think it's a really cool companion piece to the Coppola Dracula film, in that they're both very dreamlike. And
you're talking about this one.
Yeah, this and the Coppola Dracula. Like, they're both very dreamlike films, but done with a very different artistic voice. And it's kind of cool to see like how 2 different directors approach that. And obviously you have one that's, very grand, kind of old school Hollywood, and then this one that's much more minimal, like art housey.
Yeah, one of the weird things for me watching this was that all the characters' names changed, but like they changed back to what they were. Because this, like, as Connor was saying when he did his sign flip, or not his sign flip yet, but when he did the synopsis, this is a remake of a movie that had been remade that is a ripoff of a different movie where the first remake uses the some at least of the character names of the thing that's being ripped off. And this has a lot more reverence for the original movie that was a remake for, so it actually changes the names back, even though I don't know if it technically had to.
No, and that's something I complained about with that first remake, so I'm glad that he did that. And then I also feel like it's in Germany because it's Nosferatu, but they're all British because it's like originally a British novel. Like, I feel like that's the way he fuses them, maybe.
Is that what's happening?
That's my guess. I don't know.
That makes sense because I mean
I,
it is a heightened, stylized feeling world, but at the same time it is really period accurate. Again, except for that, except they should have, and maybe it's also just that old school thing of it is easier to fake a British accent.
yeah, for sure. What was I gonna say also with that? Oh, there's also like a bit of like cinematic, uh, like the dog eating its own tail thing, where like that old school German expressionism is what inspired Tim Burton, and then Robert Eggers has come out now and said that Batman Returns is a big influence on this, which I'm glad that I heard before I saw it a third
Interesting.
time, because there is so much Batman Returns in the third act of this movie where I was like, oh my god, like this is like almost the exact same shot from that. It's really cool.
I never would have thought of that, but now that you say it, wow.
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting. Where like obviously that's a big inspiration on him, on
That's
Burton in the first place.
that's
But then also you
fascinating.
have Willem Dafoe, who played Max Schreck in a biopic about the making of Nosferatu, and now he's the oh my god, I'm like I have both names on the brain. They're like fighting right now. He's the Van Helsing character. I think that's pretty cool.
Van Fraz, and then Batman Returns used the name Max Schreck for a villain.
In Batman Returns, exactly. So really,
It's all
this movie
connected.
is the culmination of all of cinema. Really, is what we're saying.
Uh, let's go ahead and get Robert's sign flip. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, I don't really know where to start. This was my most anticipated movie of 2024. I like Robert Eggers a lot. I like the original Nosferatu and many Dracula adaptations. Ever since October, I've been on a big Dracula kick that hasn't ended, and I'm totally cool with that because I got a lot more I need to watch. But yeah, this film I've only seen once. But for me, before I give my sign flip, what I did was because unfortunately I'm really lacking versions of Dracula on physical media. So for green, I went with the Lugosi, with the classic, and then for red, I went with the Van Helsing because Dracula's in it. I actually like this movie; it's a guilty pleasure, but I don't need to explain myself. But in terms of how I feel about this movie, yeah, and the reason why I don't have a Nosferatu is I don't own either version of Nosferatu on physical media, much to my chagrin. I really need to get on that. But as for the new one,
And that's public domain and probably cheap, so you could probably be holding up a red and a green of the 22.
that's true. I can also just watch it on YouTube right now, but whatever. But
You
as
legally
for,
make your own Blu-ray and then sell it.
I should do that.
Except you
So,
should
yeah.
go with a slightly different color palette just to throw everybody off, like it's in sepia tone this time. Or...
Yeah. Oh man, there's so much to talk about this movie. But as for how I like it, I'm feeling it. Big feeling it. Really liked it. This isn't. It's funny because for a lot of people, this is overhyped or mid, as the kids would say these days, and I just don't agree. But also, I didn't come out of this like, oh my god, that blew my mind. That's one of the greatest things I've ever seen. It's just a situation where I was really excited for this movie, and I got exactly what I got. A faithful adaptation of both Nosferatu and Dracula, directed by Robert Eggers. That's what I paid for, and that's what it delivered on. So it didn't blow my mind to any degree, but it was my most anticipated movie of the year and turned out to be my favorite movie of the year. So I am very pleased with this picture. I really like it. As for worst thing, best thing, again, it's hard not to say, the production design, the costumes, the makeup. We'll get more into that later. But best thing I'm going to go is actually screenplay, just as an adaptation. The way this handles, I'm just going to refer to the original book names. I'll probably go back and forth with that. But with the Van Helsing character and the Renfield character and the Jonathan Harker character, I think this, to me, balances everybody better than any other version I've watched. Because often Jonathan will get shafted, or Renfield will get shafted, or characters will be combined and cut. And with very few exceptions, most of like the key players from that story are here, with a couple exceptions. But I really liked how everybody was used. And while this is very faithful to F.W. Murnau's original Nosferatu, like there are still changes, there are still additions. They do something a little different with Renfield and the Renfield's type character and the climax and some of the setup, and all that really worked for me. I thought, as far as the ensemble goes, everybody got something to do and was really balanced and well handled. And I'm very pleased with that. Worst thing is really just gonna be a nitpick for me, because all I have with this movie are nitpicks. The reaction to this movie is weird. It's one of those where a lot of people are saying, "Oh, it's really boring, it's really slow," and other people are saying, "Oh my God, this movie never takes a breath. It's too intense. It's too noisy." And I'm like, I don't understand either of those, but okay. I don't know how those work together. But for me, I could have used more setup to all the people who complain about this movie being too slow. I could have used an extra 5 to 10 minutes of setup. I actually would have liked a bit more downtime just with these characters before Jonathan, or Thomas in this case, has to go off on his journey and the plot really kicks in. I actually could have used a little more setup. I wouldn't have minded that. I'm still perfectly happy with what we got, but that's really my main worst thing. That's my main nitpick, is just I could have used 5 to 10 more minutes up front just for a bit more downtime before the horror kicks in and things escalate. But overall, I'm very pleased with this movie. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Let's hear from Connor now.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk. Yeah, I guess I'll kind of jump off from where you're at, Robert. When you're talking about the reception of this movie, some year I feel like for the last 2 years, I kind of, when it comes to culturally the way movies like and the conversations go, I've been with it, and this is 1 year where I am not. And when it comes to like all like the Oscar contenders this year, I disagree like with almost all of them. And like this is like 2018 or 2016 all over again for me. Like, yeah, no, I agree. In 2018, the best movie was about sort of like the clash between black and white America, and like a friendship. It sure as heck wasn't Green Book. It was Blind Spotting, but I guess we agree on that. And then this year, I guess Emilia Perez is maybe going to win. I haven't seen it yet, but I have a hunch that my favorite movie of the year is going to be a different movie about trans identity and stuff, and it's not going to be that. So, but when it comes to like Robert Eggers movies, I feel like I have been like this interesting like cultural divide between me and everyone else, because I like The Witch, and I really like The Witch. I'm not crazy about The Lighthouse, but I saw it once, like 5 years ago now. When it comes to The Northman, I do really like that movie, but like when it comes to all of them, I don't love them, and I kind of have the same response to them that I have towards Denis Villeneuve's films on my first viewings, which is, I think this is like really good, not quite great. I like this movie, I don't quite love it. And but I think it's excellently made. Like I totally see the craftsman here, and like I see and like when it comes to Villeneuve's film, like I have that exact same reaction to all of his movies on a first watch, except for Blade Runner 2049, which I completely loved. And from the moment he was announced on that project, I'm like, yeah, I haven't loved any of this guy's movies, but that feels like the right pick. I feel like I've been hearing about Robert Eggers doing a Nosferatu film since like the day I saw The Witch, and I was like, oh. I wasn't crazy about The Witch. I did really like it, but that sounds like I want to see that. That sounds really cool. And this was like a Blade Runner 2049 experience where I went and I saw it and I was like, oh my God, like hell yeah, that was awesome. I was like electrified. I was in California visiting my brother, and I was so into it, even though our audience was awful. Like the worst audience ever. Like the second half, I was so locked in that the entire audience could have gotten even worse and like completely turned on the movie, and it wouldn't have mattered. I was so into it. Like yes, and I was finally having this like electrified like experience with a Robert Eggers movie, and it seems like this is the one that they're like most people do seem to enjoy this, but this is the one I'm seeing the most people down on, and I'm like, what's going on? I'm so not with it when it comes to like the culturally like this year when it comes to movies. So yes, I am definitely feeling it. And
you guys are getting inventive with your signs.
Look, I've been drinking the blood of Dracula, and I.
But you never drink wine, so.
Look, yeah, I think the best thing about this movie is, well, I guess to go back to like culturally where I'm not with it. Willem Dafoe gives the best supporting actor performance of the year. Like he's amazing in this movie. He's so good. and he's not even in the conversation. Like I've not even heard like movie nerds and movie fans talking about him like at all. Like I'm like, what's going on? He is like obviously the best, like maybe even the best performance I've ever seen in a movie. At least while I'm watching it, he's so good. But yeah, I guess best thing about it is I think that like this movie does have a theatrical opulence and bigness about it that I guess I don't really. I'm used to Eggers movies being kind of dry, and this one I think he was able to sort of like get past that for me, and like there is like a sort of like theatricality here where he kind of allows the himself to look a little goofy. And like I've heard, like I heard somebody, I can't remember who, I wish I knew, but somebody had said that like Eggers feels like a filmmaker who like with his camera feels very self-conscious, like he's very concerned about not being wrong. And I feel like that is sort of like held back his other movies in terms of like just trying not to get any foot out of step. And like I'm like, yes, like that's kind of I think a little thing I've had with him. This one he doesn't seem to be afraid in getting a foot out of step, if it means being more ambitious. And so and I think like yes, like he did a good job. As far as like my least favorite thing, like I don't even really know what to say here. I think that like as far as like kind of restructuring things to where like the Lucy character from Dracula and like her gentleman suitors are kind of like made into a married couple, that's a really good structuring thing. Like as far as like you know, you have your Van Helsing character and a doctor and Aaron Taylor Johnson. By the way, the timing on this could not have been better for Aaron Taylor Johnson.
That was hilarious.
Goodness
I didn't know he was in this, and when I saw him, I was like, that looks a lot like that guy. I'm sure that's not who that is. And then it was like I didn't even believe it at first.
He was in one box office hit of December.
He needed this movie so bad.
Yeah, oh, and not to mention, I went and saw The Brutalist, and the guy who plays the Rhino in Craven is in that movie. And I was like, the timing on this couldn't have been better for that guy. Because he's really good in that movie.
I also wasn't 100% sure that was
but yeah.
Nicholas Hoult for the first couple minutes, just because I just saw him in another movie this year too, although that was a movie that was shelved and then just thrown on Max. Because that was Juror number 2, which is, by the way, a movie that I'm not going to review but would recommend. But for a couple minutes, I was like, nah, that's probably not him. And then that was him. I kept having that with this. I knew that was Defoe coming in, though. So I wasn't wondering if I was looking at Defoe. That was pretty clear.
This movie does have a crazy cast.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't know. I don't really even have a worst thing. Like, this isn't my favorite movie of the year, but it's in my top 5. And, you know, it's one of 3 movies that came out this year that I never thought I would even see because I'd been hearing about it so long. And I think eventually, like a couple movies back, Eggers said that this just wasn't going to happen. So I just kind of made my peace with never going to see it. And then I saw it and it was awesome. So anyways, I'm feeling it. It was a great way to end the year.
And this has been a disappointing year for you. You've seen a lot of movies this year you weren't crazy about. So this is a nice big win. Or last year, I should say.
Yeah, no,
that's kind of a big win.
There was
for
like 2 movies that are like the best, like exemplary, like in my top 5 of like the decade, and there's a few more that I think are pretty great, and then there's like 10 or 15 that I think are good to really good, pretty good, and then there's like I seen like 80 movies, and the rest are just kind of like meh. So yeah, I needed this. It was better than Mufasa, I'll tell you that much.
Hot take.
I'm just so thankful that this movie did not bomb against Mufasa and Sonic the Hedgehog 3. The second it was announced, like, coming out next to those and, like, an animated Lord of the Rings movie, which ended up being the one that bombed, I was like, oh my god, Nosferatu is going to bomb. It's going to make no money. Robert Eggers is going to be, like, thrown to the side. Like, you have 2 bombs in a row. You're done. I'm like, that sucks. But it's doing really well.
That Focus Features financed this after The Northman made nothing at the box office, so that was
yeah,
cool.
Sam. Which also, like, does that technically make this a Universal monster film? I don't know, maybe.
Maybe.
Connor, I do have to say, I think I've lost.
It's not quite Universal.
I think I've lost a slight.
Not quite Dracula.
Yeah.
I think I've lost a slight degree of respect for Connor because he actually saw Mufasa in the theater. I don't. I don't know how I feel
Look, I
about
had
that.
to see it to believe it because there's no way Barry Jenkins made that, right? And I was like, oh my god, he did. Oh no.
I've just seen one clip of the song where Scar talks about Mufasa as his brother, like in my timeline, like a million times, and I'm like, I can't stop seeing this clip everywhere I go.
I'm glad that became a meme because I was laughing my butt off during that part. The other part is Mads Mikkelsen voices the bad guy in that, and his bad guy song is he's like, I'll make you go bye bye, bye bye. He's gonna kill you. He's gonna make you go bye bye.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Connor, I didn't want to know that.
Does Disney just
Austin,
like
I'm sure
really
did.
hate Mads Mikkelsen? Like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
Anyways, Kat, what'd you do? What'd you think of
What'd you do?
Nosferatu
What'd you? Well,
2024?
I went to the theater. I watched a movie that you guys also watched, Connor. That's what I did. This is only so I don't feel especially qualified to talk about this. I'm glad we've got a panel tonight. This is only my second time seeing an Eggers movie, and I've only seen the Lighthouse once. I missed The Witch. I'll have to do that at some point. I missed The Northman. I'll have to do that at some point. He doesn't make the kinds of things that I immediately just gotta go rush out to see. But if somebody like straps me down and makes me watch them, I assume that I will probably enjoy them. The Lighthouse was a movie that I kind of had the same thing Connor did, where I was really impressed with it visually, and the performances are amazing, of course. I was not sure how to feel about that ending, and I've got to look at it again, and Austin and I will be talking about it this week. So I hope I come around on it, because I can't even say left. I watched it during COVID when I was sick, so like I was in a room with nothing better to do, so I didn't leave. I stayed in that room, but I turned off the TV. Going, I don't know how I feel about that. This I had a much more kind of clear response to going out, and I did in fact leave the theater, but I do kind of want to see it again, because I was a little more indifferent to it than a couple of you guys on first viewing, where like I was really impressed with it atmospherically, and all the performances are amazing. I kept wondering if I was distracted by this is just a me thing. I was distracted by the fact that I had seen the Herzog movie, and I'm not a Dracula guy, and I don't even know the beats of the Dracula movies all that well, because I haven't seen any of them in a very long time. So like I've seen I don't even remember which one. I've seen one of the very early Draculas, and I've seen the early '90s movie, but it's been forever. You know, the super out there one. But I wondered if I wasn't familiar with the outline of Nosferatu, if I would have been as engaged with this as I was. I just don't know. Because you guys were talking about how people are complaining that they were kind of bored watching this. I think there might have been stretches where I would have been also, if I didn't have the much more boring Herzog version to compare it to. I'm just not sure. I was always captivated by performances. I was always impressed with cinematography and production design, which I guess I'll make my best thing. It's a generic pick, but at least one of you guys already took Defoe's performance, so I'll just go with it's a really damn pretty looking movie, and it was a fun thing just to have wash over you. And then worst thing, I'm gonna be irritating and be in that camp of I don't know how to feel about the design of Nosferatu himself. I have this contradictory thing where it is simultaneously absolutely menacing and as scary as it can be. And sometimes I'm kind of laughing at it, like all at the same time. Like I cannot deny It's creepy. There are places where it really bothers me. And by the way, I also really like how uncomfortable this movie is in a lot of places. I like all the chances that that Eggers takes. He's not interested in like modern social sensibilities. He's just not afraid of anything. I really appreciate that he can go back to the 1860s and not have any sense of revisionist history, which I don't think you can take for granted these days. And I really, really, really respect it for that. It's not scared of sex. There's a lot of people reviewing this movie that seem to themselves be scared of sex because they just don't like it in their movies. And sometimes I will hear people say like, oh, times have changed and you can't do X, Y, and Z in a movie anymore. And then I see a movie like this and I go, and it's making money, and I go, well, not only can you, but it feels like an adult made it. You know, like and I hate to say it like this, but sometimes and people are entitled to their opinions, but when I hear people say, ooh, there's too much like sex in this movie, or romance in this movie, or with this one, like uncomfortable, weird sexual stuff, it kind of separates the men from the boys a little bit, where it's like, maybe you just need to watch more things and appreciate like basic important parts of living life as a human being. Sorry, like sex is part of that, and eroticism should be okay. And I'm not saying that this is a that this movie handles the sexual stuff in a romantic way, because it does not romanticize its Dracula in any way. This is a freaking terrifying monster thing that nothing should have sex with. So, but there is this kind of like I don't know if eroticism is the right word, but it just seems like there's this attitude sometimes of we're enlightened and we've moved beyond that, and I'm like, well that's weird, because that's just a part of life, and so it feels like a movie made by adults, and I really appreciate that. But yeah, I guess worst thing is I just don't know how to feel about the Orlok performance. I think it is correct, and I don't know if I like it. That's where I'm at with it. Like that voice is something else. Like it's probably correct, but I did find myself laughing at it a little bit. And there's also places where I just don't have any idea what the hell he's saying. It wasn't always the easiest thing to follow. I am definitely feeling it. I bet I would have what Austin did and like it better on a second viewing. But I walked out a little bit more indifferent than you guys, but still certainly impressed with it on an artistic level and a thematic level. I didn't talk about the main thematic thing I found interesting, which is like science as doctrine, and I think there is a social commentary that doesn't play just for the 1860s, that certainly plays now. The idea that we think we've got everything figured out, and so we ignore the things that we can't explain because we're following the science. I really like that. But anyway, so that's my review. I probably have nothing else to say.
To jump off your point though, Cap, when you're talking about like, some people like just, don't want to have, like, it's kind of related to what you're talking about earlier, what you were just saying, to where it's like, oh, as a, in movies, like we don't want to have certain things in it or something, and because we think we don't need them in our movies anymore. It's like, no, we do. Like, we're always gonna need it. It's interesting because my brother, the first time we went and saw it, he had the same thing you did, Cap, where he was mostly indifferent towards it. In our audience, I was so perplexed by their responses to everything, because you would have thought they were all going to see the Robert Eggers movie on opening night because he makes comedies. They were laughing the whole time at like the eroticism, and like, it's like people like like the sounds the human body makes, or like the sounds people make with their voices, where it's like moaning. Is it pleasure? Is it pain? Yes. Like, is it like the sound of like blood and like squishy liquid moving through flesh? Like there's something kind of erotic there, but it's also just not even erotic. It just is, right? And
Mhm.
it'll be ambiguous when you hear like a suckling sound. It's like that's just the noise the human body makes, and everyone's laughing. And I'm like, why?
Yeah, that's why I couldn't decide
Um,
if I like that word, because it's erotic from Orlok's perspective, right? But it's like
yes.
really uncomfortable from our perspective and from the main female characters. But then it's also erotic for her in some degree because she's being like almost telepathically taken in by him.
Yeah,
You know,
she's being
there's that
desired at all.
there's that
And
control that's happening.
there's something primal there.
Yeah, and obviously loneliness is a huge theme. We can get into that. But
But the second time
no, it
I
sounds
saw
like you
this,
watched it with children that don't know how to watch a movie made by adults. That's what
Yeah.
that's what it sounds like.
Mhm.
And the second time I saw it, like packed theater, it was quiet, like silent the entire time, which was shocking to me because there are some parts in this that are funny. Like
Sure.
Willem Dafoe has a line that's like, "I've seen things that would make Sir Isaac Newton crawl back
That-
into his mother's womb."
I'm glad you remembered that line. That's
laughed.
so good.
I was the only person who laughed. Everyone was silent the entire time. And I was like, "Oh, cool. I much prefer this experience, but I am a little surprised. That's funny, right, guys?"
Defoe
Yeah.
brings like the only levity that's in the movie, but he's not the comic relief. Like I'm not laughing at him the whole time, obviously, but it's kind of neat to have a character that comes in like that I like simultaneously brings a sense of perspective to the whole thing and also a little bit of humor, and not like comedy, but just
Yeah.
he sees a little bit of the humor in the world that everybody else in this small town is too close to because there's plague rats and everyone is dying.
Yeah, that's a place where he reminded me a little bit of Hopkins in the Coppola movie, where like he comes in and like brings in some like witticisms that are amusing, but not like comedy beats really.
Yeah, my favorite bit in Coppola's movie is, I think it's Cary Elwes' character who asks him, like, "Are you saying you want to defile Lucy's grave?" And he's like, "Oh, no, nothing like that. I just want to cut off her head and tear out her heart. That's it." And it's great. I love Anthony Hopkins' Van Helsing in that movie. It's so
Me too.
over the top and silly. And this reminded me of that, but dialed back just a little bit and with more of a degree of empathy and compassion for not that that's entirely lacking from the 90s movie. That's just a very heightened campy operatic movie, but here I think that's why Willem Dafoe is just such a great standout. Is he feels like one of the most three-dimensional characters who has genuine empathy, and there's a bluntness to what he's talking about where he does. It's not that he's trying to be silly, he just doesn't care how people see him. He's just speaking his mind and doing what he thinks he has to do, and he believes in what he's doing, and that's just really compelling to watch. He's just wonderful with it. Definitely one of my favorite versions now of the Van Helsing type character. I think my favorite's still Peter Cushing and the Hammer Dracula. That's just it's Peter Cushing. That's impossible to top. But at least like from the script perspective, I think this is my favorite take on that character. He's so good in it.
Yeah, my favorite line from him in this is when he's like, "Oh, she's possessed by a demon," and Ralph Ineson comes in and he's like, "Well, he's speaking metaphorically."
He's like, "No, I'm not.
No,
I'm
a
not.
demon."
It's an actual literal listen to the words." Robert, it sounds to me like there's it sounds to me like there's a whole audience that I'm really on about this that can't deal with some of the adult material in this movie, that would see the character that you just described from the Coppola movie and find him like just straight up relatable, because he's murdering and maiming people and setting people on fire, but at least he's not having sex with a corpse. Like, that's going too far. And I'm not saying that's not friggin' weird and wrong and out there. I'm saying that I don't know why that's the line.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is also a movie where PETA came out and was like, "Hey, you can't say that rats are carriers of disease." There's a lot of weird reaction to this film. Also, Like, you had that whole thing, like, back in the summer or whatever in New York where they killed that squirrel and raccoon or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Nothing. This movie's like, oh, rats carry disease? We gotta shut that down.
It sounds like Eggers is making movies for people that still live in reality, and it sounds like there's which is, ironic because this is a very, sometimes surreal, like Connor said, dreamlike feeling movie, and a real heightened kind of thing. But it sounds like increasingly we're seeing fewer people that live in reality. I want to move on from this topic and
Can I add one more
get
thing
into the
to that,
movie.
though?
Yeah, Robert, go ahead, sir.
Well, to what both of you guys are talking about, I got very lucky with my theater. I had a decent crowd. Everybody was quiet. A lot of people were getting up constantly, going to the bathroom, but they were always coming back or whatever. So that was fine. So I had a solid theatrical experience, and I haven't seen it a second time just because I don't want to risk that dice roll. I'm just gonna wait till I can watch it at home because I know this is a movie that people may laugh at or respond weird to, and that's just what I like about Robert Eggers' style. Because you were talking earlier about like the eroticism of it, where I think Coppola's Dracula, the crazy '90s one, is trying to be a more overtly erotic film. Whether it succeeds or not, it's obviously up to the viewer. If that's what he's trying to elicit. But with this film, what I love about Eggers' style, there's just a bluntness to it where I think how you react to it says more about you than what's on screen.
That's great.
In my opinion, because I love, and I wouldn't say I love any of his movies. I like The Lighthouse a lot. I like The Witch a lot, Northman. But for me, that when this was announced, I was like, oh, that's just a perfect project for him. Let's go. Though I wouldn't think of him as like one of my favorite filmmakers by any means, but this is the type of movie, to what you were saying, Cap, about like separating the men from the boys, where this is not the Blumhouse generic horror film people have been conditioned to see in the theater with all the jump scares and but you have a good laugh and then you go home. What Eggers does consistently in all his movies is he does like making you uncomfortable. He does like taking people out of their comfort zones and going to weird places, and sometimes you might find that kind of funny, or just like, it's funny how many people have been negative to this movie saying, oh, it's weird, I didn't like it, or it's weird therefore it's bad.
Yeah.
Which I just don't agree with. And with the sexuality and stuff, again, it's just very blunt and matter of fact, and characters discuss it and react to it in just a very believable way that I totally appreciate and totally works for me. Yeah, it's gross. Yeah, it's dark, but this is also by no means like the most extreme, graphic, insane movie I've ever seen. It's like I'm
also
well, it's saying something about all of that.
Yeah.
But I'm shocked that's like a part of the discourse now, because like they're vampires.
Yeah.
Right.
Violent and sexual monsters. That's what they've been for centuries. Like, what are we doing?
Well, I feel like, and I might be wrong about this, sometimes I feel like reviews like that come from people that don't go to movies, and for whatever reason, this is the one they saw recently.
Yeah.
It really kind of feels like that sometimes. There's this weird, and I don't want to say prevailing, I think it's just like the loudest voices. I mean, the audience score for this was 75%. So, I mean, obviously, this is the minority we're talking about. I did see the Red Letter Media video on this, and they mentioned 75%. So, I feel like, though, that there's some of the loudest voices have this idea these days that if something is in a movie, the movie is what is the word I'm looking for? Pulling for that idea. That it's that it's advertising that idea. So if there's like super creepy sex, or somebody has sex with a corpse, that's the movie advocating for having sex with corpses. I don't understand that. So you have to avoid putting anything in a movie that society would frown upon, which means we should stop making movies.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the point we're at, I don't know what the point of making movies is.
Well, one of the things I had going into this, so there's now like a take I see like more and more often with the original, that it's like a very anti-Semitic film, and I've heard a lot of people try to argue it, and I think it's a complete reach. But there was a part of me that was like, okay, Eggers is probably going to walk that back a little bit. And then I saw it and I was like, no, you can lob every single thing that people say makes the original anti-Semitic at this one, And like, if you believe that, it does stick. Like that is, it is the exact same in that way. Again, I don't. I think that's silly. But I was really surprised that he didn't kind of have that reaction with it. Like, I think that kind of goes in with what we're saying about how it doesn't really feel like it's made to appeal to those modern sensibilities like that.
Yeah, well, it's well, I was I don't know, like when it comes to the whole like Nosferatu, the original being anti-Semitic, I do think there's anti-Semitism kind of in the bones of that a little bit. Like I don't necessarily think the movie is advocating for anti-Semitism, but I do think there's maybe some cultural anti-Semitism there in the sense of like Knock just looks like a Jewish caricature.
And it is a German movie before the Nazi,
like and so like it does kind of have aesthetically these things into it, but like, and so I'm like, okay, well, when we do Knock this time, like they're gonna probably like tone that down. And it's like, well, what I thought was interesting is that they cast a guy who looks just like Mel Brooks, but he doesn't look like a Jewish caricature. He's like, I think that actor, he looks anyways like quite Jewish.
He's
just
a Jewish guy.
They're not. Yeah, but it's not a caricature. It doesn't feel like some kind of mean depiction of a guy. It's just like a guy who happens to also be Jewish is also in league with a vampire. It doesn't feel like... I thought the way he handled it all is quite intelligent and smart, and I don't know, like he's like trying to honor the aesthetics of the original, and that's something that I think that like what you're talking about earlier, Cap. Like I think we need to like engage with art that might have problematic aesthetics, and we can still look at aesthetically, take what we like, and like observe what maybe hasn't aged super well. But like, I think Nosferatu is a prime example of something like that, where it's a part of the canon now. Like it's so influential, and German expressionism is like one of the like pillars of early cinema. But it's also kind of released, or like that's an art movement that's in the early 20th century Germany, and there's other stuff that's going on in Germany that is kind of tied to it that you can't really take out of it, and we just got to like understand that. And so like I don't know, like I think we should keep Nosferatu as is. I really like that movie, but I do think there's some stuff culturally there that's also worth noting. So.
Well, and also everything's got to be case by case, and you gotta look at the context. And I always say that. So with this movie specifically, not that I'm hearing anybody saying this, but just as a maybe absurd example, I could see because people are saying this about other things with this movie. I could see somebody looking at the way women are handled in this and going, "Oh, look, it's another movie that's subjugating women." And you go, "It's in the 1860s." So like when our main female character is being completely dismissed with her problems and gets strapped down like she does, and that's all both like wrong and disturbing, and also like very historically accurate. We also get the Willem Dafoe character who comes in and goes, "This is ridiculous. Quit doing this to her." So I guess that's good. But that also doesn't feel like modern sensibilities creeping in. That feels like a character that could exist in that day, in that world. So I like the line it's walking with that. But like you got to look at everything with context. Is the behavior problematic, or is the fact that it's allowed to be in a movie problematic? Because I dismissed that idea completely out of hand.
Oh, certainly. And like one thing that I like though is that like you're able, it's about like kind of the role, like the kind of confined roles of women in this time. But like Aaron Taylor Johnson is still like a completely believable guy. He ties her up because the doctor told him to, and he's like, well, it's the doctor, so I'm gonna do it. Like he does want ultimately what's best for her, just the behavior isn't and he's like not empathetic enough to really understand that, but he is, I don't know, like it smartly understands that, and I appreciated that too.
Well, the irony is that comes from the ignorance of science, with a bunch of people that think they've got everything figured out, and so they're ignoring the supernatural in the name of science. Meanwhile, they go, "Oh, this girl's acting like she needs an exorcism. Ether."
Yep.
And I think Aaron
I
Taylor
will say,
Johnson
for
was
that-
like, "Well, I'm Craven and he's Galactus. I better listen to him. He's higher up in the."
I don't like that
echelon."
you brought Galactus up before I did this time, Austin. I almost said that a minute ago, and I didn't quite get there yet.
I will say,
No.
for about 3 or 4 scenes, this is the best like exorcism movie that's been made in
Yep.
like years. There's so many terrible exorcism movies that come out all the time, and like there's a point where they're doing like he's on the bed and he's got the crucifix, and I'm like, this is so cool.
Yeah.
That was an angle
missed
that
this.
I loved, and I don't know it. I imagine that's not part of the original. It wasn't really, if memory serves, part of the '70s remake, but the like full-on demonic angle where you have a vampire that is almost also a possessing spirit and that can be conjured up through a magical incantation. I thought that made the monster a lot more mysterious and scary, and it made it harder to know like what he's able to do. Like I really liked that. I liked the kind of Ouija board of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the kind of stuff with the vampire here is like they sort of present him as like the ultimate monster. He's there physically, but he's there spiritually. He's like, you know, bringing out like the darkness within each of the characters and making them at conflict with one another. He's bringing literal plague with him. Like it's there, and like the movie has like this very grim, oppressive tone, and it like becomes this crescendo of dread for like an hour or so in the middle. And like what I like about the vampire in this is that like he does sort of feel like the tone of the movie in physical form. And what I kind of like about it is that like I'm not a huge Bill Skarsgård fan. I think a lot of his acting is very like I'm just seeing an actor trying really hard to like show you he's a committed actor. And what I liked about this performance is that he does allow like this is more a performance, or like this is more a character that's realized by production as much as it is performance. Like his voice and his breathing and like the sound design and the lighting and the makeup and like all this stuff is enhancing that performance to such a degree. It does feel like Eggers is as much a part of that performance as Skarsgård is, and I do kind of like that he kind of lets himself be used that way.
So you're saying you liked this more than The Crow?
A little bit. I would say a little bit more than The Crow.
Do you think the exorcism aspect, Connor, would be better if Van Helsing was played by Russell Crowe, though? To throw in another Crow?
You know what? This would have been a 10 out of 10 if we replaced Willem Dafoe with Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe thinks this is just like the Pope's Exorcist. He's like, I don't care. I'm just gonna show up.
So Super Billy put in a bunch of super chats just as the show started. We haven't gotten to those yet, so let me read those down real quick. He put in a $2 super chat and says a fantastic film on almost every level, and then he puts in another super chat and says a $5 super chat. Though I have issues with the design, Skarsgård was incredible as Orlok. Love how they use simple camera tricks to demonstrate his enhanced speed. Yeah, that's a good point. And like Connor just said, I had to keep reminding myself that there was an actor behind that performance, which is not a criticism of it. Like I still don't know how I feel about the voice and stuff. Somebody brought up Dark Knight Rises Bane. I had a little bit of that where there were just places where I went, is this effective or is it funny? Like I couldn't decide. But at the same time, he is just that it gives it this otherworldly quality about it. So like you almost don't. I mean, the point is that character is not human, and that it has the same loneliness that that some of our other characters have. Like that's kind of the main thread throughout the movie. We can get into that a little bit after I read these. But I just had this thought, Connor. Do you think it's going too far to say that the way the idea of like loneliness and isolation is handled in this movie, it's almost like that is synonymous with evil, at least as far as like the human condition goes, where the thing that you have to really avoid in life to not lose yourself and go off the rails is being completely lonely, and that is personified by the loneliest, scariest thing imaginable.
Yeah, it's
like, is that what it is?
I got my own read on it, but I can see where you're coming at with that. I hadn't actually considered that way of thinking about it, but I think you might be onto something. Because yeah, I mean, when we first meet, is it Ellen? Is it Ellen Harker? I know it's Mina. Sorry, I said Harker, Hutter.
Ellen Hutter.
Ellen Hutter, Frau Hutter. But like, she like is so lonely at the beginning, and that loneliness does let the evil in, right? And so like, I think you're probably onto something there. Yeah.
And the main motivation that everyone has in this to just go along with societal norms is to not be set apart, is to not be alone. And that itself creates this naivety and this refusal to accept reality and look at what's really happening with the supernatural. I think all of that is intertwined, and then you get to Defoe's character, who has made this massive sacrifice in being alone in order to accept the truth, which hardly anybody else in the movie is willing to do, and he simply ignores the evil while while by the end he's fighting it.
Yeah, he
That's a really
sacrificed
good
his
read of it.
reputation.
Yeah, and like he's drummed out of the university, and he's kind of made into a laughingstock. He lives alone, and he's the most jovial person in the movie. Like he's accepted that. He's like the exception that proves the rule. Where like we need other people, we shouldn't just be alone. But that guy recognizes that society doesn't have it figured out right, so he's being almost the like superheroic character in saying, "No, I'm gonna take one for the team and be lonely to fight loneliness ultimately."
Well, yeah, and like it's very interesting to me that you have like all this read on it, because these thoughts and these loneliness is a concept that's been on my mind a lot over the last year or so, and like these thoughts and like these feelings, like I've been feeling them a lot.
You and I have had many a discussion
honest.
about this.
Yeah, and it's just interesting to me that like I did not really see any of that in this, at least on the first go around. I was kind of more taken with other things in it, but no, I think you are onto something there. It is interesting how like in kind of seeing kind of where society is with him, he understands that there isn't a place for him, at least not yet. And maybe there won't be, but maybe there will be, but he has to be honest with himself. And honesty is another aspect of this movie, like where you can't like not live, you can't like living dishonestly is going to like wreck you. And, it's one of those things where I think that's part of the thing with Ellen in this, is that like she does love her husband, but there's this whole other like darkness inside of her that she does need to confront. And she kind of wishes she could be as ignorant as everyone else, because they're much happier than she is, and they do have like roles in society, and they do have companionship and whatnot, and it's a very interesting kind of dynamic.
Yeah, I wonder, because I hadn't had this thought until you said it like specifically the way you did, Connor. I wonder if that's maybe why he when he's talking to her and he has that little moment where he's like, you're in kind of like a tragic situation now, but like in another era you could have been like a high priestess. I wonder if he's maybe seeing that in her because of like what you just said, and how he sees himself and his role in society.
Well, and Connor, to your point about refusing to look at the world as it is and being honest, and then you have the guy who kind of loses his whole family over his denial.
Yeah. And by the
None of
way,
these
I
are
was
things I
shocked
was
when they
thinking about
actually
while
did
I was
that.
watching the movie. Sorry, what, Connor?
No, it's I was surprised they went there because like when
Yeah.
it shows, I guess spoilers now, when it shows Orlok drop one of the kids and start eating on the other one, I'm like,
Oh.
okay, so this is a dream, right? And then it cuts
Yeah.
to the coffins.
That's
dude,
what
I'm
I thought. Dude,
like, they did that.
that was...
I rolled my eyes so hard on a first viewing when it like cut to them and they're like, "Oh, there's the monsters under our bed. You have to come fight them." I'm like, "Okay, I can see the hack screenwriter like." Later on, they're gonna scream about the monsters under their bed, and they're gonna come see, and it's Dracula, and then they're gonna save the kids. And then when we got to the payoff, I was like, "Oh no, okay, that's not at all where we're going. This is great."
That, like, there's a lot of, you know, obviously messed up and then just sad stuff in this. That was the saddest thing for me when we cut to him staying next to the coffins. Because he's got twins and I've got twins, and that whole thing was like, ugh.
Well, in the shot where he's like breaking into their family tomb, like where he's desecrating it, that was the big like, oh, this is the Penguin going to see his parents' graves in Batman Returns. I was like, this is like just straight out of that movie.
Can you imagine if Danny DeVito got Orlog? If that was the casting?
I'm gonna be a neighbor.
I'm an appetite, nothing
No.
more.
There's a scene I'm gonna be paying attention to whenever I get to watch this movie again. That on the Dead Meat podcast that they pointed out, where it's around the funeral scene with the father, Aaron Taylor Johnson, and the rest of his family's dead. Where he's in the he's in the carriage with the rest of the main characters, and they're all talking about this vampire and their plan, what they're gonna do, and Aaron Taylor Johnson's just sitting there quiet with this 1,000-yard stare, like, oh my god, all these people are insane, and my family's dead, and it's just like that's when he's like, this world is not for me, and why he makes some of the choices he makes in the following scene. But he's one of the most tragic characters in the movie, where he is in denial.
Yeah, all three times I've seen this, I'm too locked in on him in that scene. I'm like, oh, he's broken.
And he's got a couple of really good opportunities for change that he does not take.
He has like a great, like, oh my gosh, like perfect use of your Aaron Taylor Johnson. I was so happy to see this so close to after watching Craven, because like this is how you do it, right? Like he has a great bit where he's like, "Oh, I am shattering" at the thought of it, where he's like in disbelief, and he's doing this thing with his voice where he's like perfectly cutting it up as he's talking it, but the timing of it is like perfectly broken. It's really funny, and that's like tied into this other monologue about no, there's a real plague that is happening in real life right now.
Yeah,
he's really good in it. Like I really am happy I could see this to remind myself that he is in fact a very good actor.
Well, Connor, when we reviewed Craven, we said that that's not going to affect his career in any way, but I just think it's hilarious because one of you guys said like he really needed that this year, and like yeah, just make the year look nicer, but like it wasn't gonna affect him. Like he was gonna be fine after that. But I do think it's really amusing that this comes out like immediately after that and does really well at the box office. So it almost looks like, if you don't know anything about movie making, like they just scrambled together to make a better movie for him to be in and then get it out real quick. Like the timing of it is really like, what if Craven comes out after this?
Well, for me, I think he just needed this in general. Like, I love Kick-Ass, but outside of that, I'm like, I can't think of another movie where I'm like, I really like Aaron Taylor Johnson. Like, even movies that I do like, you know, like the Gareth Edwards Godzilla film, like, I don't know, he's fine in it. That's like so many other performances from him I have.
He didn't
It's
get to do
either,
anything
like,
as Quicksilver. He just showed up and
oh, yeah,
died.
it's
Like,
Quicksilver. And then
how can you have any opinion on his Quicksilver? He just shows up and dies.
Nice.
because he's always annoying, and then I cheer when he dies.
I do think it's funny that he was faking a Russian accent in that too.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's even because then he goes to Craven, and I guess he doesn't even fake a Russian accent. Like, right? Isn't he just his father's Russian?
No.
But he's yeah.
Yeah, I saw Craven the second time, by the way. So
What?
I have all the things. Look, me and Spencer and Rasco, we got very drunk at a
Oh, you
Margaritaville
told me about
and we
this.
found ourselves
That's
in Craven the Hunter. All right, so The things you notice, by the way, on the second viewing of Craven the Hunter are crazy. But
Well, a lot of
a
what
lot
I
of
would
movie,
notice,
really.
I would be noticing for the first time because I slept through 40% of it.
no, it's funny. I was watching it with that lens of like, you could fall asleep during this scene and not miss anything. You could fall asleep during this scene and not miss anything. um, but no, he's good in like Tenet. He's like shows up for like a couple scenes in Tenet,
Oh yeah.
and he's pretty fun in that.
Oh, I didn't even remember that he
But
was in
yeah,
that.
I mean, I don't really like Bullet Train, but I think he's good in that.
Yeah, like
Me too.
he's
but,
pretty
like,
good in
I
that,
like
but you're right, I don't like Bullet Train either. But he is good in it.
But like that's kind of the thing I've noticed about him is like he just keeps showing up in these movies they don't really like, but he's like fun for like 2 or 3 scenes, and I'm like, we need to give him a movie, and then we got him Craven the Hunter, and I was like, oh, okay.
But back to kind of him in the other performances, though. I think that is, we were talking about it earlier, a style that is throwing some people off, where it is very theatrical.
Yeah.
It's like watching theater and is kind of heightened, and I like that. And we've compared it a lot to the Coppola movie, but that one to me is a lot more operatic and campy. This to me is more just classic theater, and I really dug it. Again, it's still a style of acting that's heightened and not everybody's cup of tea, but
Well, it's written
just
that way. I
across
mean,
the board,
it's
totally
really
works.
talky.
Yeah.
In some ways, it's a better version of the original Dracula in that it feels like a stage play through a lot of it.
Yeah.
Except where in that one, I feel like that's a negative I have with it, while in this one, I feel like that's something that works about it.
Yeah,
Well,
like
it's
this
also
is a melodrama. I call this a melodrama.
I agree with that. It's also refreshing because the period dialogue is so authentic, and again, in the same way as I feel like, and I don't watch enough movies, newer movies, so I could just be out of touch. But at the same time, in the same way that I feel like a lot of movies don't look like they're made by adults, a lot of movies don't look like they're written by people who read. And this one,
Like Craven?
Eggers clearly is a reader. And I really
Oh, yeah.
really
Yeah.
appreciate that. That's where my
Yeah.
bar is yay, the man reads books.
Yeah, I want a just hour, 2 hour long podcast that's just Robert Eggers and Mike Mignola talking about old folklore and like things they've read, because I feel like they both read the exact same things, and I'm like, I want to see that.
That'd be cool.
I just
like Robert
watched.
Eggers would make like the Hellboy movie that like to be made, but at the same time, like I'm fine with just hearing them talk, because there's no way I'll get a Robert Eggers Hellboy movie.
Yeah, there are two things I want Robert Eggers to make. I want him to make a adaptation of Phantom of the Opera, because we don't have a lot of good ones, and I think he'd nail that material. And I know Austin's going to disagree with this, but I would really love if he made an adaptation of A Christmas Carol. That was one of my
Oh,
big
that's
takeaways.
cool. No, that would be
It's a
cool.
Christmas
Whoa.
movie. I love the atmosphere. Watching this, I'm like, this is that Christmas Carol movie that's like been in my head that I've never gotten to see. Because unlike Austin, I actually like that story. And I think he'd be perfect for that. Just cast Ralph Ineson as Jacob Marley, please. And I'd be so happy.
and Scrooge. Yeah.
I want that movie.
Robert, that blew my mind. Yes. I mean, I will settle for any Dickens novel, but yes,
Yeah, sure.
that would be
Give
a
anything.
great match. Well, speaking of old-timey stuff, and like, I don't know, I feel like I might be a little, have branded myself as like the guy who don't like references. Get your references out of my stuff,
There's
whatever.
a lot in this.
And I do feel like there's one, like, here's how you win me over with a cool reference, all right? When it's nighttime and Count Orlok is near, they basically, the lighting is monochrome, but it doesn't look like a black and white movie. It looks like a silent black and white film that has been tinted
Yes.
like the original Nosferatu. So it looks like it's been tinted blue, and it's that distinct blue
And
that like silent films were tinted, and it's so cool. Like,
But it also feels
was,
part
like,
of
the
this
first time I was
piece.
watching
Like, it doesn't feel like
Yes.
it doesn't take you out. It's not like now we're doing the thing that you
No.
came to see.
And
It-
when
it
there's
makes
like
it feel
fire
like
like in the background, it goes orange, and at least every version of Nosferatu, the original I've seen, is orange too. So that's
Yeah.
something to
Yes,
think
yeah.
about.
Depending
But
on the
all
time of
the
day, they'll have different tints. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
yeah, the
That's like
original
the biggest thing to
Nosferatu.
mind.
Yeah, I mean in public domain for many years, you could only usually typically find it just in black and white. But with the original tinting, it was primarily blue and then kind of a sepia tone for the daytime scenes. And the scenes lit by candlelight in this looked very reminiscent of that. It's really cool. I love the way this movie uses such a simple color
Now,
palette that homages the original. And he does
when
cutesy
I,
things too with the Easter eggs. Oh, sorry.
but I am such a nerd for silent movies. In particular, like the silent era, I love. And when we got to like the nighttime scenes and he shows up, like it does feel like an otherworldly twilight hour that like he's visiting, the people on. So like it does feel motivated. But then it's also just a stylistic choice that I'm like, they're doing it. Like I was like almost coming out of my skin with excitement in the theater. I was like, God, I can't believe I'm seeing this in like a giant theater in a sold out. It's like, yes. It was so exciting to me.
I had a
That's
thing like that, Connor.
that to me is Blade showing up in Deadpool and Wolverine. Like,
I had a
that
thing
was
like
my
that,
Blade.
Connor. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry,
No,
I
no,
cut
no,
you
no.
off.
Continue.
No. I
Okay.
had a thing like that. As a Carpenter nerd, I've heard him talk about his love for the Panaglide like 8 billion times. Like that man wants to make love to that camera. He loves it so much. I don't think I've ever seen a movie that loves like the gliding shot as much as this film. It's in like every single scene and like the entire film. I was like,
Yes.
oh my god.
Well, it's funny you say that, Austin, because I remember when I saw the trailer, I'm like, this looks cool. I'm gonna see it. But I was like, oh, like in the trailer, I was like, a lot of these shots are like locked down shots. And then like every once in a while there will be like some camera movement. And I'm like, I like the way these locked down shots look. I don't know how I feel about it when it starts moving around.
Mhm.
And then when I watched the movie, the camera's moving like all the friggin' time. And I was like, oh, it looks awesome. But yeah, no, it is moving
Yeah.
constantly. It looks great.
There was a thing I saw the other day. It was comparing the three beach scenes in like each Nosferatu, and it's like look how great this shot is in the original, and then the one in the Herzog film, and the one in this film's not as good. And it's like okay, but those other ones are like just static shots. This one is like you're following them. Like it's so much.
It's
Like it's
so
such like a bigger
cool.
shot. Yeah, like it's not just here's a still frame. Like it's a whole thing that he's doing. Like
Yeah, if you like long takes, which I do, there's a lot of that in this movie. And with Coppola, like this isn't a Sam Raimi type. Like the camera's not crazy or in your face like a Raimi movie or Coppola's Dracula, which I love. Like Robert Eggers is a filmmaker who doesn't want you to notice the camera, and I think that's fine. Like I know the way he shot this movie is kind of a point of contention for some people, but I love it. Like a lot of the shots are very symmetrical. Some of the framing's very like Wes Anderson-esque, which I dig, and like you guys said though, like the camera, it's not, to me, like it's not boring. Like it is always moving. It's just deliberate, and he likes his long takes, and I think it's cool. And the way he navigates the sets, I find really neat, and shoots everything. And like Cap's always complaining about in certain movies, coverage. You can see everything in this, and I like that.
Why build a set if you're not gonna ever give me a wide of it? I hate
Right.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna build a
that-
prosthetic penis, you have to see
Yes.
it. And a certain other thing this year built one and then didn't let us see it. So.
Now I'm just waiting for the live action adaptation of Batman Damned, so we can get one for that.
It can redeem the Penguin.
And then it gets taken out for the Max release.
Yeah, exactly. Hey,
we should talk about Count Orlok's design.
Before we do that, though, let me read these other super chats from Super Billy real quick, because we got away from ourselves, or with ourselves. Super Billy put another $5 super chat and says both Skarsgård and Rose Depp deliver amazing performances, stunning visuals and direction. Surprised by how theatrical it was. Manages to avoid being histrionic, and we've kind of talked about all of that already. And then he has one more. I love how the film recreates iconic shots in interesting ways. You guys just talked about that for the original and Herzog remake, but this is almost as masterful. Wow, and I mean, I don't agree with that. I think this blows the Herzog movie out of the water, just because, like I said, that movie I do find legitimately boring, and it's not like nothing works in it, but this has the style and the deliberate cinematography that I was missing from that. And this is a point I meant to make early on. Very often you'll have newish filmmakers that will go, here's the big movie that inspired me to get into this business. I want to remake it. And then they'll remake it, and then I can't think of a good example right now, but I know I've had this with stuff. And then you'll go, well, you remade a masterpiece that was fine the way it was. I don't know what the point of remaking it was, except you're being self-indulgent and it's your favorite thing, so you want to live in the world of recreating your favorite thing, even though it doesn't need to exist. This is one of those few examples of a thing where I completely understand why the man would want to remake his favorite thing, because this is a thing that you can, again, without lacking in historical perspective and having a sense of revisionist history, you can update the material with modern technology and with modern visuals while not like losing the integrity of what the thing is as a historical piece. And there were definitely things that that you could add to it. Like, this is a little bit more character focused than either of the other versions, and so this is one of those few things that I think making it again did make sense.
Well, it's funny because I have heard that criticism from some people. I've seen some negative reviews say, "Oh, this is way too faithful or restrained by the original, and it's just a shot-for-shot remake," which I just don't agree. It's very similar.
I mean,
like,
it's not. It does add stuff, particularly.
It's not a silent movie.
But it's not even a shot-for-shot remake.
The love story thing too. That's not in the original.
Nope.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, her character arc is totally different. We talked, and I think is more than solid. Like I think that's tragic. I really appreciate like the responsibility that she takes in making the sacrifice at the end. Like, I think it makes the sacrifice way more poignant. Because you have that in the other version I saw, but what's added to it here is all of this is kind of her fault, and she takes responsibility for that at the end. And the whole thing is really sad because you see the vulnerable place she is at the beginning that has her conjure the spirit and basically make a deal with the devil. But at the end of the day, if she hadn't done that, all these people she cares about wouldn't be getting killed by plague rats. Now, I do kind of have the question. Tell me what you guys think about this. And I had this even a little bit with the Herzog version, but this one especially. We have this kind of like talk in the background about destiny a little bit. This idea that that she is destined to make the sacrifice. I guess she was also destined to set this upon us in the first place, and then to clean up her own mess at the end. But you've got Defoe's like you are special. You have this ability, and you have this connection with Nosferatu, and you are the only person that can get us out of this. And I'm going, okay, but he knows that probably the one thing that could kill or at least incapacitate Nosferatu is sunlight, or is at least something about his not being in his coffin. She is a good distraction. That's not a bad idea. But there might be other ways to do it. Like, there's no discussion about see if we can get an army, lock him in a box. Like, there's no discussion about it. And the only thing I can think of is he does have potentially powers they don't know about. But at the end of the day, he's going to be in a room with her just not looking at the clock when the sun comes up, and he's not going to be able to, like, magically like apparate out of the room or anything. So if Defoe is pretty sure about that, then I don't know why there's not a discussion about all the other potential ways that they could get him not looking at the clock. Yeah, it's basically like Mixelplick saying his name backwards. Like, why is there not any discussion about a way to do it without her having to die.
I think it helps that it's initially her choice. It's not a scenario where he tells her, "Oh, I figured it out. This is what you have to do." She's already made the choice by that point. She's already figured out that it has to be me to distract him, to take him out.
And I'm fine with that being the ultimate conclusion, but I just wonder if there shouldn't have been at least a little bit of discussion of, okay, but are you really the only person? Are we sure about this? Oh, okay, I guess we're sure about this. But there's no talk about any other possibilities.
Well, there's also just a fairy tale quality.
That is true.
Eggers is going for that I find with just what's presented.
No, you're not wrong about that.
I mean, that's a totally fair point, but I also, again, that's kind of where some of the main changes are with the climax, where I love the deception angle, where the other guys don't know what the real plan is, and that deceit's a big part of it, and I loved all that stuff and how that was handled.
Yeah, and I love how maniacal Defoe plays that, where he's lighting the room on fire.
That is the best scene in the whole movie. Were you guys not watching that going, he's clearly doing all of this, there's so much that can go wrong right now?
Mm-hmm.
I could not think about the production while I was watching that. I was like, and he just kept going. I was like, he's still setting things on fire.
Yeah, it's cool. So has anyone here seen the movie Let the Right One In? It's a vampire movie. I think it's Norwegian. It came out in like 2008, I think.
I have not. It's been on my list to watch for like a long time. So that's the one that Matt Reeves remakes, right?
Matt Reeves remade it.
Yeah. Okay. It is.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of that. Okay.
And so that one's all about like this emotionally withdrawn, like maybe psychopathic kid, and it's about like the whole idea of like you need to invite a vampire in, like you have to let me in, kind of a thing. And as he starts a relationship with a vampire girl, and there's like a part where she's like, "You got to invite me in." He's like, "Why?" And like, "What happens if I don't?" And then she like walks into his bedroom from the window, and she just starts like bleeding from her eyes and nose and mouth and ears, and she starts bleeding from everywhere. And then he's like, "Okay, you can come in." Oh shoot, sorry. I don't know why I don't know if you guys heard that, but a device yelled at me. Anyways, but
that's funny timing.
I heard a voice and you were like, "Oh my god, I'm sorry." I was like, "Did someone just walk in?"
That's what I thought.
I just thought you were committed to the bit.
No, this sound bar just started yelling at me, like, "Oh my god!" Sorry, that jolted me. Anyways, but in this, when Nosferatu, like when Count Orlok is like dying, like when the sunlight hits him, he starts like bleeding out of his face like that. I'm like, "Oh, is that a reference to Let the Right One In?" Like, that's cool.
Don't you hate it when that happens?
Yeah.
Hey, Austin,
it happens.
I have a question for you. Were you disappointed that at the end of the movie, after she makes the sacrifice and Nosferatu is gone, that there's not like cops that come in and arrest Defoe?
I mean, that would be funny. For a second, I thought you were going to say that it didn't then end with them walking out of the house while the Ghostbusters theme plays and the credits go down the screen.
Well, because that happens in the Herzog version with their Van Helsing, and I
forgot about that. Yeah.
I was kind of waiting for it, and so when I heard that people were complaining that the movie ends abruptly, I actually had that a little bit because I was waiting for the arrest to happen.
This Van Helsing maybe should get arrested with how crazy he was in that fire scene.
Well, and I wanted to see Defoe play that too, because he would have been like, "Look, I just saved this whole town, and I gave up my whole career and reputation for what I believe in. No, what I know." And like I'm imagining it's writing itself in my brain right now as he's getting arrested and taken to prison. And
no, but oh, sorry. Go ahead, Robert.
He should get arrested for stealing Helen's cat at the end, because we know he's bringing that cat back to his house, because he's got a lot of money.
No, what should happen? Yeah, because he's holding the cat at the end, so he should get arrested, and then the last shot of the movie, or maybe if this movie had like Zero Integrity, this would be like the 5-second after credit scene. He's in a prison cell, like stroking the cat, like they let the cat go with him.
And then he bites its head off, and Ralph Ineson's like, "Now, why would you do that?"
Oh no, that's sequel bait.
It's happening again.
It's happening again.
That's
No,
Nosferatu.
in that scene when she dies,
That's so good. Nosferatu.
Nicholas Hoult. The third time I saw it, which
I think
was,
Connor just threw up a little bit in his mouth. Did you see that? Connor, just look at his face like puns.
The third time I saw this.
Sorry, go ahead, Austin.
That's okay. When I saw this again on Saturday, Nicholas Hoult, he's like putting her Rose Depp's eyes down because she's dead, and a guy in the back of the theater goes, "Is she dead?" Really loud for the entire room to hear. And my sister just turns to me and goes, "Yeah, stupid." Like, the movie's been telling you that she's gonna die for the last half hour.
Her chest is open.
I love that detail where he sucks blood out of the heart.
Yeah.
That's a great
Yeah.
detail. I think that's a fun change.
Isn't that a thing in the? Isn't that a thing in the book, Austin? Doesn't Dracula bite people on the chest, not on the
I'm
neck?
not sure. Possible.
I'm not sure. That's just a thing I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
Quickly to that point, you're like that reminded me, Austin. I did not know how long this movie was going in. This movie is the fastest 2:15 ever. Like it feels like it's an hour and a half to me. It's deliberate. It's not like a fast-paced movie, but I am so locked in while it's on that it zooms by.
I was
think
surprised.
It's the best structured Dracula film ever made. Like, whether it's the best Dracula film, I don't know. Like, it's debatable, but structurally, I think like it absolutely is.
I was surprised by how quickly we got Thomas out of the castle. Like, there's a lot of urgency to that in this version.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he's got a lot more presence than that character in the other version of this that I saw, because the movie loses him for a long time, and obviously it has to for a little bit with this because he's in real bad shape for a while, and he gets incapacitated. But like the movie totally, it feels like with the Herzog version, forgets that he exists for quite a while. When he finally comes back, I'm like, I almost forgot about this character. And this seems almost deliberately, like, really careful not to do that again.
Well, and famously,
is great. Sorry, what were you saying, Robert?
Yeah, he is.
Well, and famously in the Lugosi one, they changed a lot by giving all the Jonathan Harker stuff to Renfield, and it really works for that movie because that Renfield actor is great. The problem is Jonathan then gets lost to the shuffle and is such a nothing character in that movie. And like I said, that's what I was alluding to earlier, where with a lot of versions, there's always give and take, where one character's kind of shafted or another character's handled really well. This one just balanced everybody perfectly. Even the Coppola one, which is very, to my knowledge, very accurate to the book in a lot of areas. The Renfield of that's good. He just doesn't feel that necessary to the plot. Like, we just kind of keep cutting back to him. And then he dies, and it's like, oh, okay. That was at least my reaction the first time I saw that movie was, oh, okay. Here, I loved the way they paid that off with him in the coffin at the end. That's so good. And how they use that character for the exposition and him in cahoots with Count Orlok and all that stuff. I just thought was really well handled.
And he was way less irritating. He was way less irritating than that character in the Herzog movie that just will not stop with that obnoxious laugh. And I'm like, for the love of God, stop. Hey Connor, do you know why Orlok sucks blood from the chest in this?
Why is that? Because
he attacks the heart.
That's good. That's good. We're coming full circle. All of these Willem Dafoe things.
Osborne.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Austin. What were you saying?
No, I was just gonna say Renfield also has a scene with the best joke of the entire movie, which is that part that I alluded to where he bites the head off of the bird, and Ralph Ineson's like, "Now, why would you do that?"
My
It's
good
like
friend.
the most casual reaction.
Now, why would you do that? I was
So
distracted
proper.
by thinking about the production with that scene too, because I was just imagining the handoff. Like he's got
Yeah.
a living bird, and then obviously you got to give him like a prop that's set up to like be spurting blood. So like, all I could think about was he's not eating the bird he was just holding. Like that's
Yeah,
all I
was
the
thinking
third
about this
time
too.
I was like, okay, I need to really look for the pass off because I'm like, obviously that's how you do it. And then I was like, okay, I didn't catch it that that's what was going to happen the first time because I think they add like a blink when he pulls it back up to bite it. So I'm like,
Oh.
oh, well, like, that's still the bird.
Yeah, there was
Matthew,
definitely a digital effect in there to make it seamless.
Yeah, exactly.
okay. Matthew Bass put in a $10 super chat and says, I would argue that the female lead here actually has more agency than in most Dracula adaptations and is undeniably the hero of the movie. Fantastic movie. But do you guys agree with me? She is that that hero though that has kind of a like road to redemption through a sacrifice thing, right? Like this is, I mean, like we can sympathize with her, but she did kind of get the ball rolling on all of this.
Yeah, that's what sets this apart from the other versions of Nosferatu, because all the Nosferatu movies do end with the sacrifice with her, and so each end on kind of a downer. But this does add that element of her kind of causing a lot of this and being a more flawed character, which I really like. And I do like the girl in the Herzog movie a lot. Actually, before this, she might have been my favorite take on the female lead, even though she's Mina, but she's called Lucy in that movie because they switched those names, which is very irritating. But I do like her in the Herzog movie a lot. But here, I just feel like is by far the most just developed, complex version of that character. And I like Winona Ryder in the Coppola movie too, but that's like a whole other take on that character in terms of her agency and where that goes. That's the tragic gothic romance, and like you said earlier, this is not romantic.
Yeah, this doesn't romanticize the whole thing. Well, that's part of like, sucking for the chest versus the neck, and we were talking about like how you're talking about the Coppola movie again, like all through the '90s, it was majoritively or maybe 100% all romanticizing vampires.
Yeah.
You know, whether you were doing like the Interview with a Vampire style or something more traditional, like it was cool to be a vampire when I was growing up, and
Well,
we've really taken it back around to kind of brass tacks again, and I do kind of wonder how much of that is a reflection of the culture that we live in, where I don't want to say that the world has become overall like anti-sex, but it is very different from what it was when I was a kid.
And I think an interesting thing is that romanticizing the vampire, I think, kind of reached its expiration date with Twilight,
Yeah.
And I think like that's really when it kind of fell out of favor.
Well, it was really popular and then kind of went away.
Yeah.
And
But
like
I mean, it's like, yeah, when is the first cool vampire? Is it the Lost Boys, or is it even before that?
That's a big one.
I'd say that's probably the first one, and then Interview with the Vampire is even bigger than that.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
In terms of like the modern, like Cap was talking about, the '90s vampire craze, I think that kind of goes back more to Fright Night in the mid '80s with the main vampire of that movie with Chris Sarandon. But also just with the idea of the vampire as a more romantic character. I mean, that does go all the way back to Lugosi, where he is very handsome and like this gentleman in a way he's not really in the book. And then like almost every Dracula for decades is copying Lugosi. And the '70s one, the Frank Langella one, which I really like, I'd really recommend. That one's also like the Coppola one. It's a very gothic, romantic movie. Like Langella's Dracula is one of the most like tragic, romantic takes on him. And I really like this as the polar opposite to that. That's what, for me, kind of sets the Nosferatu take on Dracula or Count Orlok in this case, apart from the other ones, is removing the romantic element and making him a pure perverted monster. I think that'll.
Yeah.
But Robert, my question would be, when you go back to Lugosi, is so you've got a handsome Dracula, but is it is vampirism, is the biting a metaphor for sex back that far?
Austin, do you have an opinion on that? Because it's hard to say, just because it's so we cut away from all that stuff.
Well, they cut away like you would sex.
And then when you have then Austin, if you brought the person back that you just bit, they'd be sleeping in separate coffins.
Exactly.
Well, and that's what I think is a fun reference in this, is when she wakes up at the beginning, she's in, like, she and Thomas have separate beds like they did in the original movie. Like,
Oh, that's funny.
Well,
that's really fun. Well, I'm
there
actually
is-
going back to conflating the Dracula and Nosferatu characters. Depending on which public domain copy of Nosferatu you watch, they do call him Dracula in some of them, some of the
Right.
prints. And like, it has all of the Dracula names instead of the original Nosferatu names as well. Like, it's a mess. It's so annoying.
Well, and there's absolutely an erotic subtext to the very first Nosferatu movie. It's just very subtle, but I mean, it's there with the climax. There's definitely a seduction element to it. And in the case of the Lugosi one, though, there is kind of with Mina's turn and Dracula playing on her, I would say there is kind of played up a sexual deviancy quality, but in a very Hollywood, like, that movie is not at all concerned with her repression or her. You know what I mean? Like, that movie's not concerned with her agency or how she feels about what's going on. It's just like, yep, he's the bad guy, this is bad, and there's no these other characters are good, this character's bad, there's no in between or complicated stuff. Whereas this movie's very complicated in how it handles that subject matter.
To go back to Cap's point, though, like, when you're talking about, like, sort of I'm going to say Mina, but to go to Mina's, like, kind of complicity in this all happening, I think that's where the horror of this comes from.
Yeah.
It's like, she just was lonely and sad and let some kind of spirit in. She didn't know it was her ignorance, and it's like, and that doomed her, that doomed the world. And it's like, now you have to sacrifice yourself, and it's not fair, and that's the way it's got to be. And it's sad, like, that's and tragic.
And
like,
it's
that's
such a
what
be
makes it
careful what
horror
you
to
wish
me.
for
It's-
thing, because what she, I mean, it's interesting how like kind of traditional this is. Like, this is an idea you've seen 100 times, right? Where when, in order to combat her loneliness, she accidentally evokes the dark personification of, like, ultimate loneliness. That's kind of the point I was getting to earlier, is like, it's Dracula. It's Galactus. It's loneliness Galactus. Like somebody brought up Galactus earlier. I've always had that with this character, because he's a force of nature. Like, he just has to feed and feed and feed, but he has no companionship. There's no one for him to be with. And the one big thing that the Herzog version did that I missed a little bit in this, although I don't know that it would have been appropriate here, was the tragedy of the monster himself. There's a little discussion about it, and how, sad it is that he is doomed to be alone forever as basically a living corpse. I think we're supposed to feel more empathy for him in the Herzog version, and in this he is much more of just a force of nature. But that's where I got off earlier saying, questioning, like, is the idea of being too isolated kind of this movie's idea of ultimate evil, or at least the thing that makes you most vulnerable to evil. Like, the loneliness itself is maybe not what is evil. It's that opens you up very easily to suggestion and being overpowered by actual evil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are qualities, I think, from the Herzog one that carry over into this, like the very kind of melancholy, dreamlike quality. I saw a lot of that in this movie, and the Herzog one's just shot very naturalistic, and for you guys, kind of flat. And Kinski's portrayal of Dracula in that is a lot more somber and sad. And this one, my reading on Orlok in this is a lot more of like the bitter loneliness. You know, like he's angry, kind of angry with what he is, but he feels, particularly, he feels ownership of her. He feels like you owed me, like I control you, and that's a big theme, along with the repression she's going through in her background, that this takes really leaning into. I mean, like from a very modern, simplified way you could explain this, it's like a young girl who was preyed upon by this old creepy dude who has now come back into her life many years later and is causing all sorts of trouble. I mean, you can relate that to anything, and it's just done through a fairy tale lens.
Yeah, except it's like if the sad, lonely girl gave that guy her, like, all of her personal information in a chat room. Like, it's that situation. Because, you know, she called him in the first place.
He literally snuck into her DMs.
Oh, sorry. What, Robert?
No, he literally snuck into her DMs. Like, that's the opening of this movie.
Well, that's what I was going to say. My favorite meme I've seen from this movie is just like the DM chat, and it's like on Instagram where you can see someone's story and message them through it. So it's like a reaction to that, and it's like her and Thomas together, and it's like, "Do you have a new BF?" No response. Hours later, a curse upon your house.
I gotta say, there's some good memes on this one. My favorite one involves The Substance, where a character in The Substance, they just like stop it, put it in black and white, put a mustache on it, and it says Nosferatu.
Yeah. I am pleased that we were talking a lot earlier about like negative reviews and how divisive this is with some audience. Like most people do seem to be liking this movie. It is a hit, and that is comforting and kind of reassuring. And I mean, if you don't like it, you don't like it. That's fine. But I am pleased that a lot of people do seem to be into this movie that maybe haven't seen this type of movie before, because it is doing well, and I think that's cool.
By the way, we were talking about it before we were recording, but the mustache game in this movie is
so good,
is excellent. So many wonderful mustaches. I said in my
except for
Letterboxd
Nicholas
review,
Hoult.
this is well, yeah, you know, it's a movie of mustaches, really. You got all kinds of mustaches, from scary to distinguished, and I think Nicholas Hoult, his character's chief trait is that he is insecure. And he also has a bare upper lip, and there's probably something going on there. It's maybe part of character design.
Well, I said to my siblings, I was like, I'm so glad we got like a big mainstream Dracula adaptation where he had the mustache. And they were just like, oh my God, you're right. He looked so much like Eggman in this movie. That's all I could think of the entire film. And I was like, what?
Well, I actually had that too. When he first came up, my first thought, because we just reviewed Sonic 3, was, oh no, I'm seeing Robotnik, and I'm not going to be able to not see that through the rest of the movie.
Yeah, they had that the whole movie.
Some people think the mustache looks silly. That wasn't the thing about it that I was even questioning. I thought that just kind of went along with the period.
Yeah, the costume, everything he's wearing is entirely period accurate. Which is a detail that Robert Eggers is obsessed with. He's like, no, I want this to look like a nobleman from that region, from this era. Like, I think he's even wearing high heels. You just don't get a good look at it. But I think the outfit's awesome. I love the hat. It also looks kind of similar to the hat he has in the original movie.
Yes.
And the mustache. Mm-hmm. It's funny because the mustache is more for that period authenticity of like, well, no, like that was a sign of like royalty, or there was a prestigious value to having a big mustache like that. And like Vlad the Impaler, Eggers pointed out, like as an inspiration, like that famous portrait you always see, he has a mustache, and Dracula in the book has a mustache. So I love it. I'm glad we got the mustache of this. I'm so glad they kept that secret, because we didn't get a good look at him in the marketing, and I love that.
Yeah, the original Max Schreck Nosferatu is one of my all-time favorite just movie character designs, period. And so I was like low-key just expecting fidelity to it, and I think most people were. I love that. That's wonderful. But and so my initial reaction when I first saw the mustache was, oh no, is that a mustache? What are you doing? And then like right after that, I went, "Ah, but I love it. It's so I gotta be honest, guys. I love the mustache. It's wonderful. It's
When did
so
you first
cool.
spot it? Because when he's sitting in front of the fire, like talking to Thomas, like, and he's in silhouette, I could just barely see it. I was like, I think he's got a mustache. And I was very excited about it. And I was right.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was shadows or not, but then when it's like he's like pouring the drink and he's still out of focus, I'm like, I don't know, there's something there. And I guess like I actually shaved my beard and just kept a mustache just before Christmas, and I saw this on Christmas, and I was like, no way, no way.
My favorite thing about his design is that he's so like huge, and he's like this giant force. And then when you finally see him at the end, he was really like a decrepit skeleton under everything. Like it was all a front. I think that's such a great design choice.
Well, he's got a crazy like kind of anatomy because it's like his lower body looks kind of like a dog. Like it's really
Yeah.
weird looking, and like kind of like shrimpy and small. But yeah, like going back to like him being like an ultimate monster, he's kind of a zombie. He's kind of an undead thing. Like it's cool.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
like
love
the like Red Skull level anticipation of what he's ultimately going to look like, which is
Mhm.
which is another big risk that Eggers is taking, because it's not the conventional. I mean, it's classic in its way, and it's unconventional in another way. It's not what a lot of the audience is going to expect, that he doesn't care, and I respect that a lot. And so when you finally see it, some people are going to be disappointed. They're like, really? He's just a big man with a mustache. Like, that's odd. Like I was expecting him to have the pointed ears and look like, he did in the original. And then other people like you guys, it pays off really well. But I always like when you have a big imposing character like that, or even just like non-human characters that are hard to pull off and look good on screen. I always go back to 1990 Ninja Turtles. I always just like making you wait a little bit, where like they're present, they're there, but you only get like little snippets of them, and you get like Raphael's hand with his side, and you get a little glimpse of his eyes, and then finally they all jump into screen. You're like, yeah, and this kind of had that, but with Nosferatu.
Yeah, and the payoff's perfect. It's the best scene for it, when Thomas opens the coffin and you get your first really good look at him, and then he wakes up, stands up, grabs the pickaxe, chases him. It's on, and you see a lot of them, and it's a big risk, but it's awesome. Like, that scene's great.
Yeah, another thing I really like is that because he wears like a coat over his shoulders, so there's scenes where I'm like, oh, he's got like giant arms, like that like hang, that he's like holding down like that, and then I realized like, oh no, he's got like little arms that he's like doing this. He's doing like a Mr. Burns thing, but his coat like hangs down to make him look bigger. Like, oh, it's so cool.
And there's just enough of that original Nosferatu iconography in there, though, like with the long fingernails and little design choices like that. It's just evocative enough of that original look, while putting its own new spin on it, that I really appreciate.
Yeah.
And,
oh, sorry, what were you saying, Robert?
that one thing Robert Eggers was asked about was, well, why remake Nosferatu again? Why not just make a new Dracula movie? And it was the more monstrous take on the character that he really latched onto, and the ending, which you were talking about earlier with Ellen and her sacrifice. Like, that's what really sets the ending of that movie apart from the book and most Dracula adaptations, and making her more of the hero of the story and giving her back. So I love that this is what he went with. I'd still like another good Dracula adaptation at some point. I've heard the Netflix one that was on BBC really went downhill, so I never watched it. But I'll take this. I am very happy with this.
I also hope that he keeps doing some, more original projects. It doesn't fall into a rut of just adapting things. But this was almost the second movie he made, so it's not like now he's deciding to do adaptations. Apparently he wrote this years ago, and it almost didn't make it, and was like, wow, it would just be laying around, and I did all this work on it. I sure hope we can actually get the thing together at some point.
Oh,
Yeah, The Witch came out. He was like, the next thing I want to do is remake Nosferatu, but don't worry. I know that sounds bad. It's not what you think, but it's funny because if you actually think about it, it's like, okay, he just made The Witch, and it's not that kind of horror movie. But also, if you're gonna make like the really generic modern remake, you're not gonna do Nosferatu. You're gonna make Dracula.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
The fact they're even going to that is like indicative of what it's gonna be.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think that 135 million it's made or whatever the number is because of the brand recognition of the super popular 102-year-old film Nosferatu.
Right.
That might be some fraction of that, like less than $1 million of the $135 million. I think it's word of mouth before it's anything.
And it's the SpongeBob audience. You know, this is just a really cool spin-off of the SpongeBob cartoon.
And it had really good advertising.
Yeah.
Like I when I finally saw an ad for this, because Austin's been talking about this for months, and you guys know me, I'm not a big horror guy, so I was like, I don't care. And then I saw an ad for this, and I was like, okay, I'd go see that. Like,
yeah,
and I want to say, like, when I saw the previews, like, I never saw like the preview in a dark theater. It's always like the lights were still on or like the projector was dim, and I was like, I really hope this movie, I don't doubt it's gonna look good, but every time I see it, like, it's hard to see what's happening. Like the part at the end of the trailer where it's like you see him in silhouette and it's really dark, I see like basically nothing when I see the trailer in theaters. And when you watch the movie, like, so many like digitally shot, usually streaming shows just look flat and gray and not very good. And Eggers does shoot digitally. I don't have anything against digital, but like this does look deliberately like monochromatic and desaturated and gray, and it does look like it's like a lot of the time lit by moonlight. It's a dark film, but it does look great. And so I was really happy to see it in IMAX in a theater. Like it was very cool. I'm glad I didn't watch this at home or it didn't get dumped on Max or something.
I do hope this doesn't have a Godzilla 2014 home release like the Blu-ray of that.
Oh no! Oh, God.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the way it looks. And what I was saying is that, you know, this is something he's cared about his whole life, you know, because he loved the original when he was a kid, and he had like a bootleg VHS copy that didn't even have a score on it. It was literally silent. But he just found it terrifying and really cool. And you'll find this interesting, Cap. When Robert Eggers was a teenager, he wrote for his school a play version.
I read about that. Yeah.
Where he played Count Orlok, and the way they did it was all the costumes and makeup were black and white. So watching the play was like watching a black and white play because everybody.
I didn't know that part. That's cool.
And they used like title cards and stuff from the original movie, so it was like watching a silent film play. And clearly, it's not at all the direction he went with this movie, but it's something he's always been just very passionate about. And I just think that's really awesome.
That is so awesome. Like,
it's so nerdy.
I actually had an idea to like do a costume where like it's monochrome and like you make yourself look like a black and white character, and he actually did that. That's so cool.
Would you have to paint your face to do it?
Yeah, that's what he did.
That's cool.
Yeah.
When we all make fun of like, oh, this feels like, you know, a high school production or whatever, that's like the one where you go, oh my god, this kid's going somewhere.
Right?
That's genuinely really creative.
Really quick, I want to read this.
But yeah, no, I guess
sorry. Go ahead, Connor.
Just to kind of tie up what the point you were saying though, Cap, is that apparently his next movie is an original screenplay about like a medieval knight. So
that's
so cool.
He's keeping it original.
It'll be the story of Willem Dafoe and his horse.
Yeah, is The Witch also period? Because I've not seen that movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so at what point does
It
he
is.
make a modern day film, I wonder?
I don't think he will.
Maybe he won't.
Yeah, he's obsessed with like period piece stuff.
But I would be curious
He's a
to see
history nerd,
to see him challenge himself that way, where he still makes something like real stylized and heightened like this, but that's set modern day, or that's just so out of time you can't tell.
Mm-hmm. And one thing you talked about up front that surprised you. Oh, sorry, Connor.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Just one thing you discussed earlier, though, was I was actually surprised that this was still set in Germany. I thought it was just going to move the story to London, because obviously from the trailers everybody had British accents. So for his obsession with authenticity, that was the one thing that did take me a second to get used to. Is, oh, like, this is in Germany, but we're using an English speaking cast. Okay, like, it's, it's how we used to make movies. It's fine. Like, I got used to it very quickly. I was just surprised he made that choice. But then again, because like the Witch is extremely authentic. Like, that is early America, very old English and very authentic. But then again, with like the Northman, I guess in that movie he had characters speaking English and didn't go all the way with old Icelandic or whatever that was. So yeah, I guess he's.
But then, like, there's none of the titles. Like, the title card for the Northman isn't even in English. It's in
That's true.
Celtic runes. Like, it's
right.
It's, like, in every regard, it's historically accurate, except they're speaking English, and it's really kind of weird and distracting to me, to be honest. It's weird.
I have that with Nicole Kidman in that film, where she pops up, and I'm like, you've had a little bit too much work done for me to not be a little taken out with how much, accuracy they're putting in.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm not to get too far down a rabbit hole with this topic, but I'm of two minds sometimes about like authentic language for like where you are and when you are, and just having a thing be in subtitles. Like, I don't know that that's always necessary. I kind of want to sometimes go back to the device that you don't see as much anymore, where you'll get a scene or two in the with all of the actors doing like pitch perfect the language it's supposed to be, and then you push the camera in, and then when you pull it out, now they're speaking English, and so we know they're still speaking their language, but now we don't have to keep reading subtitles. Because I was watching what was it? I saw a movie the other night that did that. I was like, oh yeah, that's a device we used to do. I don't know when the last time was I saw that, but
I always think
Hunt for Red October does it. That's what it was.
Yeah,
and that movie's hilarious because it has a whole bunch of people that I don't remotely buy as Russians, especially Sean Connery, but even like a lot of his compatriots. I'm like, like Sam Neill is supposed to be a Russian. I'm like, Sam Neill has a very Germanic looking facial structure to me. I was like, you make it because he's wearing like a Russian naval outfit, and I'm like, you put him in a World War II movie and make him an SS officer, and I completely buy it. But he's supposed to be a member of the KGB or whatever. Like, no.
Conspicuously Scottish Sean Connery is not very Russian.
Yeah, it's hilarious, and he's speaking Russian in his accent. It's wonderful.
It's great. At least in this movie, though, why it's not too jarring is we're at least primarily in one country. This isn't like a Ridley Scott Napoleon situation where all the French characters are speaking English, but then we see other regions and sometimes other people are English and sometimes they're speaking their own language. And I've heard that it's very jarring and weird. So this at least doesn't have
everyone has different accents. Oh my god, yeah. Did not care for that one, I must say. I will say though, like I was impressed by Lily Rose Depp in this. I just assumed Anya Taylor-Joy would be having this role.
She was supposed to.
The press release came out that she would not be. I was like sad and disappointed.
Me too.
Because I don't know. I feel like there's definitely a certain type going around now, which is the role that Anya Taylor-Joy passed on, and so Sophie Thatcher's been taking up all those roles in like Heretic and stuff, and now like this one was like another like who kind of looks like Anya Taylor-Joy, Lily Rose Depp, kind of, but she does do a really good job, and I was impressed.
What's the ultimate trade-off? Because we lose her for Lily Rose Depp, but Harry Styles was supposed to be Thomas, and we got Nicholas Hoult instead.
Thank God. Yeah.
Nicholas Hoult really. But that was a cool thing. Like, there's like a shot early on where it's Nicholas Hoult and Aaron Taylor Johnson standing next to each other. I'm like, oh, like those are like the same generation of like actor, like leading men.
Yeah.
Like now they're like aging into like being distinguished actors. They're no longer the heartthrobs. And
especially when you think about
these guys got it.
Especially when you think about like Kick-Ass and X-Men First Class, coming out like around the same time.
That's right.
And kick off their careers.
And now they will have both played two different comic book characters.
That's true.
Yeah. And
from
Holt,
two different companies,
Holt
both
really
of them,
is.
which is interesting.
Yeah.
Wait. Oh yeah, Holt is going to be Lex Luthor. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting
He
that.
went from being so jealous of everyone's mustache, Connor, that now he's jealous of everyone's hair. It's a new running theme of his career.
Yes.
I personally appreciated just not knowing every actor in this. Like, I was kind of glad it wasn't Anya Taylor-Joy, just because, like, I see her all the time, and I like that actress a lot. But I wasn't familiar with this one, and I'm not saying that I'm, always taken out just because I recognize actors, but, like, it just would have been, like, one way. It was just kind of nice to not every scene know somebody real well.
No, yeah, certainly.
Yeah, and
That's
I
how
like
about her friend. I hadn't seen Deadpool and Wolverine. I didn't know this
Oh,
lady as like Cassandra Nova, but like
Did you
I
know
thought
that, Cap?
they were great.
I didn't put it together while I was watching it, no.
Yeah, good range.
Yeah, no, good call. And now that that you say that, I can imagine, I can see it in the eyes. She's got very distinct eyes.
Oh yeah.
One person we just saw them bald, and one person we're about to see them bald. It's a whole theme.
She's so ridiculously good in that, and I don't know that there will ever be any opportunity for her to play that character in an actual X-Men movie. But God, I need that. I need her to actually play against a Professor X. I don't care which one. I need to read a comment real quick, because I think Nicholas Moto kind of misunderstood something I said earlier. He says, I don't think Defoe ignores the evil, considering he says, in order to combat darkness, we must acknowledge that it exists. The point I was making is that he is ignoring his own loneliness in order to combat it. That was the point I was making.
Well, yeah, and I'd have to watch it again, but he does kind of resist the call initially. Like, he does kind of need to get talked into go. If I remember the scene correctly, when we first meet him in his house with his cats, like they do kind of have to talk him into.
I think he's more just confused about the fact that anybody is there because he never entertains anyone. He's that isolated. I think that's more how that scene plays, where they come in and he's like, "No, go away," and then about 3 minutes later he's like, "Oh, it's my old student." Even though you just explained who you are 5 times, now I understand.
Yeah, I'm something of a Nosferatu myself. I played Max Shrek in a film.
But I think they really are getting at something with his like sacrificing his position and just human companionship at all.
Yeah, he's got cats. He's fine.
He's fine.
I will say this about Van Franz. A top 10 movie pipe. That is one killer pipe he's smoking in this. It's
and
so
yes,
great.
it is.
I think that's an Easter egg to the original. There is like one shot in the original where there's like a professor just smoking that pipe, and you're like, "What the hell is that?" So there are like a lot of like cutesy Easter eggs that I can see people, like, if you know that film really well, rolling your eyes. Like some of the names, like Aaron Taylor Johnson's character Friedrich, like that's F.W. Murnau. It's Friedrich. Like that's where that's from. There's stuff like that. The cat, that was named Greta. In this, which is the name of the actress who played Ellen in the movie. So there's lots of things like that.
Okay.
It's not named after Lovecraft's cat. Anyways,
I don't know. I don't know if you guys. I don't remember what scene it was, but there's one bit, if I'm remembering correctly, speaking of the pipe, where somebody is smoking and there is a shocking amount of smoke in the scene, like getting all up in everybody's face, which felt like Eggers making this big point of, yes, you can still put smoking in movies, you guys, and it's just it's everywhere.
I don't think
Yeah.
I've laughed harder in a theater this year than the first time I saw this, when you have Lily Rose Depp like spasming on the bed and they're all, like reacting to her. And then we like hard cut to Willem Dafoe smoking his big pipe.
Well, he
Like he's
lights it
Sherlock
with one of the
Holmes.
candles on the Christmas tree.
Right.
It's awesome.
Dude, that's the most terrifying scene in the movie. I'm looking at that Christmas tree, that classic Christmas tree, when we used to put candles in them for some stupid reason. I'm like, oh my god, they're gonna burn the house down. No.
Forget about rats, that's the real plague.
Austin, when you saw that we actually did some Christmas imagery in this movie, did it make you happier that this was a Christmas release? Because you and I talked about how weird this didn't release in October.
Yeah, so initially I was like, it's really weird. Like, a lot of people were like, I'm kind of annoyed that it's not Halloween. My thing was more so, I felt like we didn't have a really good horror film to like in October. So it was like, it's too bad because you're gonna have Nosferatu and Christmas, and it's surrounded by a ton of big films that I was really worried was going to drown it out. And then in the movie, I'm like, oh no, this is a Christmas movie. Like, it is cool that they put it out on Christmas Day.
Meanwhile, Sonic 3 had all those Christmas posters, nothing about Christmas hardly in the movie. Like, it's not set at Christmas time, nothing.
Yeah. Well, I did see in the trailers though, like, oh, this is gonna have a winter setting. Again, that kind of sets us apart from the other ones. Like, I dug the winter vibes, and I was like, oh man, I hope this is kind of a Christmas movie. I hope this is literally a Christmas movie,
Batman
and it
Returns
was.
look, right?
Again, another Batman Returns parallel. I love gothic Christmas stories. Give me more of that, please. I was so happy.
This has been doing. Sorry, Robert. I interrupted you. Continue.
No, it's fine. No, but like I will say, I like Robert Eggers a lot. I wouldn't say I love any of his movies. I just respect him a lot as a filmmaker and his style. But I can't say this is technically his best movie. That might still be the Lighthouse. Like, I can't say this is the best movie he's made, but it is my favorite. This is the one I see myself rewatching the most. It's very comfortable. I already know the story. I like the story, and I unironically do see myself rewatching this every December when I'm in the mood for this type of vibe. Like, it's gonna be a great December rewatch, and I love that about it.
Yeah, no, this is easily my favorite Eggers movie. I loved it. I think it's great. I will say this is doing way better than like the Bob Dylan biopic, which is crazy to think about. Like that's cool.
Oh, I didn't know that was even out yet. I actually wanted to
just,
see that. Have you seen that yet?
We have.
Was it any good? Because I really wanted to see that.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to you about it. I don't know a whole lot about Bob Dylan. I think it's an interesting kind of examination of the era that he sort of blew up in before it's actually like about Bob Dylan. It's kind of interesting. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not crazy about musical biopics, but Timothée Chalamet's a good actor. It's, he does a good job in it.
Well, and somehow this movie's even beating the Robbie Williams biopic. I don't know how that happened.
I don't know what that means.
It's another musician biopic, and he's played by a CGI monkey.
Okay.
I've heard it's good.
Okay.
I've heard it's good too. I'm like,
Are
we just at that point where we made so many musical biopics that now we have to make like the Lego Pharrell movie
Yeah.
and the CGI monkey Robbie Williams movie?
That's when you know it's time to lay off of these for a while.
But I've heard, though, it's in more of that Rocket Man vein, where it is more of a musical, and that adds a lot to it.
Oh,
that kind of separates
that's
it
cool.
from typical
Yeah, that's what I've
biopics.
heard too.
Real
Look,
quick.
when I was watching Rise of the Planet of the Apes, I wanted Caesar to have a musical number or two myself, and I'm
Me
glad I
too.
can finally kind of get that. So.
And as a big Robbie Williams fan, because everyone remembers him, you were like, specifically, I want him to sing Robbie Williams.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was listening to Millennium on my way to the movie theater when I saw it, so that's kind of why I had it in my head. But.
Yeah, I was the only one here that really liked Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I thought it was really weird that all of you guys were like, if it was just a musical, but...
I like that movie. Fine.
If the main chimp in that ripped his skin off and started swinging around like that while singing, it would have been the greatest film of all time, is all I'm saying.
And it's right there. I don't know why they didn't think to do it that way. Let me read this comment real quick. So Darren Dooley says if this director did a modern movie, it should be The Shadow. I disagree with that. I don't like The Shadow in present day. really ever.
I agree.
Um,
I'd still want that to be
but
an
I do think Eggers would not be a bad choice for a Shadow movie. I
mean,
could see him doing that.
He did make The Northman, and Thor 5 currently doesn't have a director. I'm just throwing that out there.
But I was just going to say, with the Shadow, like it would get him into the 20th century. It would be a lot closer to present day than anything he's made yet.
That's true.
That's
But it
true.
still wouldn't be present day.
He'll make a 2024 set movie in like 30 years when it's nostalgic.
In like 600 years, when he's Futurama head in a jar, he'll be making a COVID movie.
But like a medieval movie from him, that sounds exciting. I would love to see Eggers make something set in Tudor England. I think that would be a really good period for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also just
That would be cool.
have this big affinity for Elizabeth I and Shakespeare, that whole period. So I'm a little biased.
In England. Yeah, that'd be cool.
I also kind of wish that he was making the Odyssey instead of Christopher Nolan, but we'll see how that works out.
Oh,
Yeah, for
I'm
sure.
so that's. I'm sorry. Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it's
Gonna be
wild.
great.
I'm just
The
glad
ultimate
with
guy who just wants to get home movie.
yes, that's true. What I am happy about with Eggers though, with this being a hit, is he hasn't gotten caught up in like that MCU Disney slot machine, but he also hasn't done his $200 million vanity project where he just blows it and does something weird. He hasn't had his and this is a diss at that film, but he hasn't had his like Babylon type situation where he just like falls on his face and goes nuts. Or Megalopolis as the most extreme. I'm really, he's had a very steady, even though I don't think The Northman had made money, it's like he's just making the movies he wants to make, and he's getting a little bit bigger of a budget, but he's still like in his own lane, and I'm very happy about that, because he's not like some of those other directors who just kind of crashed or went too big and failed, and
He hasn't
ruined.
He hasn't had his Warcraft.
Right,
No,
that's
yeah.
a big one. Sorry, Duncan Jones.
Dan Schneider, and I love Duncan Jones, and then he had to go off and do that,
Right.
and now he's probably like bagging groceries. Like I don't know what he's doing now. Dan
No,
Schneider
Chuck, I
says
finally saw
Conan.
Moon.
He'd be
That
good
movie's
for
great.
Conan too. That's not a bad idea. Sorry, what, Connor?
No, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you're fine. I was just reading comments. When you got a panel of 4 and you're trying to read comments, it's difficult. Sorry, what were you saying, Connor?
I was saying I finally saw Moon, and it's really good. And it
Right?
made me really
Oh, it
sad
is.
that- yeah,
Moon
really
is
sad.
universally liked. I've
It's
not
rough.
met one person that didn't like Moon.
I've still
Great.
only seen Warcraft of his movies.
Oh,
That's
Yeah, and
unfortunate.
it's rough. It's rough.
Well, and I haven't seen that sequel he did to Moon because everybody said it was terrible, and so I've always been really leery to look at that. But well, anyway, we're past 2 hours. We should probably go ahead and hang it up. Do you guys have any other points or things we didn't talk about that you think needs to be said before we bid everybody farewell this evening? This evening, it's past midnight.
it's a good movie.
Yeah.
Go see it.
It is. I'm feeling a great deal less indifferent as we've talked about it for 2 hours.
It was the best movie that came out at Christmas, I'm sure, having only seen that.
Well, I only saw this in Sonic, and I liked Sonic, but this is obviously a lot better than that movie.
And
I've
this
seen
is the
all
better
the
movie
movies
with
that were-
an Eggman, because apparently Nosferatu looks like
Oh,
Yes, I am.
Orlock, the come over isn't fooling anybody, but I love you. And yeah, no, I did see all of the Christmas time releases, and this was easily my favorite. I thought it was the one to watch.
Nice.
My family and I last weekend watched Men in Black, which was one of my favorite movies, and then I watched a Robert Eggers movie, and the whole time I was watching this, I couldn't stop thinking about the Egger suit. He's the bug in the Egger suit. And I'm watching a Robert Eggers movie.
They should have
Vincent
cast
D'Onofrio,
Vincent
that's kind of
D'Onofrio.
Vincent D'Onofrio wouldn't have been a bad Orlok, actually.
When I was a boy.
He's just staring at the white wall.
Yeah, because it's lonely.
Connor,
He's just trying to get Vanessa back.
Sugar water.
Oh my
Anyway,
God, Austin! I'm gonna need you to make a tribute video to Count Orlok, set to "Want You Back." All right, that's my
Well,
that's my challenge for you.
I'm gonna write that down because there is a video I really want to make off of this, where it's that scene where they're on the beach, and she's Lily Rose Depp is like, "Do you ever feel like not so fresh?" And I want to edit that scene so bad to be a commercial. If you know, get my drift. Because every time I see it, that's all I can think of in that scene. She's like, "You ever feel not so fresh?" Of course I do, but I have the love of God in me.
not so fresh.
Oh, I can hear that commercial in my head.
Yeah, next time you watch it, keep that in the back of your mind.
You
I'll
totally,
write that down.
you totally
Watch
just
you back.
ruined that entire movie for Robert. That's all he's gonna be able to think of next time he sees it.
I hope so.
Perfect.
Well, thanks again for watching, everybody. We're going to go and get going. Sorry we didn't do a ton of audience interaction tonight. We had a panel of 4, but we appreciate the support and the discussion. And Austin and I will, well, let's see. Jason and I will be back on Wednesday for a Captain Logan show. And then Austin and I are going to, if all goes according to plan, do a commentary on the Northman on The Lighthouse. I'll watch The Northman eventually on Thursday. So yeah, two long videos on Eggers in his Egger suit this week. And anyway, thanks for watching. I was Captain Logan, and it was Connor Nielsen and Robert Wild in his Black Void with some cool figures and things behind him, and Austin, the wearing shirts out of season Day Ghost.
It's a spooky film. It makes sense.
Yeah, but it's not October.
I don't know. January is the scariest time to talk about new movies.
That's true.
Well, yeah, but not quite as scary as February, am I right?
Oh.
It seems like the worst movies come out in February.
Well, it's a
I think
good thing
it's
Cap
August.
4 is coming out in February.
Yeah.
I
Also, you didn't see Night Swim. You don't see a lot of those January movies.
Yeah. I've started Night Swim like 4 times. I just haven't finished it.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for watching.
We'll see you for Nosferatu.
Dude, you can't keep talking. I've already gone to the title screen. This is supposed to be over.
Especially because you put your hand up. They can't see it, dummy.
No.
Nas 4.